Oscar Piastri has finally discovered the shocking internal reason behind his unstoppable speed in Qatar, and the leaked McLaren report confirms this was not just a strong day but a transformative moment for the championship. The analysis shows Piastri broke DRS in only 2 laps, pulled a gap of almost 5 seconds, and delivered his cleanest sprint performance since August, proving he has stepped back into title fighting form. The updated standings reveal Piastri has cut Lando Norris's lead to 22 points, while Max Verstappen has fallen 25 points behind, placing all pressure on the final 2 races of the season. Before we reveal the exact leaked details that explain why the McLaren was untouchable in Lusail, make sure you subscribe right now, because this sprint may have just rewritten the championship. The Qatar sprint delivered one of the strongest performances of Oscar Piastri's entire Formula One career, as he converted pole position into a dominant lights to flag victory. The internal McLaren report confirms he opened a lead of 2.5 seconds by the end of lap 2 and extended it to almost 5 seconds by the checkered flag. This result ended a win drought stretching back to the race in the Netherlands and signaled that Piastri has rediscovered the confidence and precision that defined his early season form. For McLaren, it also confirmed that the McLaren is the reference car at Lusail. One of the clearest findings is that Piastri delivered exceptional tire management, the same area in which he has struggled throughout the year. In earlier rounds he often lost front tire performance when pushing early. In Qatar the opposite happened. The team notes show both front tires remained in the ideal temperature range across the entire sprint. Running in clean air protected him from aerodynamic turbulence and allowed him to rotate the car with precision. This stability helped him generate consistent minimum speeds through the fastest corners and prevented degradation spikes that normally affect long lateral load circuits. The McLaren itself played a decisive role. McLaren has built a car perfectly suited to tracks dominated by long high-speed corners, and Qatar is one of the purest examples. The leaked report confirms that no new upgrades were fitted for the sprint. Instead, the base aerodynamic concept delivered remarkable consistency. While Red Bull suffered from bouncing and Mercedes battled drag, the McLaren remained planted in sectors 2 and 3. Engineers described its behavior as stable, smooth, and resistant to wind variation. This aerodynamic superiority was central to Piastri's advantage and eliminated any realistic challenge from behind. Piastri's execution was equally impressive. The report highlights that he delivered a perfect launch with ideal clutch engagement, instantly distancing himself from George Russell. When a driver breaks DRS this quickly, the dynamic of the sprint changes entirely. Russell was forced into tire preservation and Norris lost the aerodynamic window needed to attack. Piastri meanwhile controlled the pace precisely, adjusting his lap times by small increments to keep the tires in the perfect thermal zone. His calm management and sharp corner placement demonstrated a level of control that put him in a different competitive category. The updated championship table places this sprint into sharper perspective. Norris remains the leader with 396 points, but Piastri's victory reduces the gap to 22. Max Verstappen now sits at 371, 25 behind Norris and 3 behind Piastri, meaning he is drifting out of realistic contention. The sprint therefore reshapes the championship narrative. Piastri is no longer the distant challenger. He is positioned to apply maximum pressure in the final 2 races, and Norris must now balance aggression with championship caution. Lando Norris endured a frustrating sprint due to the destructive effect of following another car in Qatar. Russell's Mercedes possessed strong straight-line speed, and the aerodynamic turbulence prevented Norris from protecting the front tires. Once the front axle overheated, his attempts to challenge were over. He finished third and admitted that overtaking is nearly impossible at Lusail when pace is similar. His frustration was clear as he now enters Sunday needing both precision and patience to maintain control of the championship. Max Verstappen delivered a strong opening lap, jumping from 6th to 4th, but his race stabilized quickly after that. The leaked analysis shows he experienced bouncing under braking and instability in long corners, the same problems Red Bull has faced all weekend. His pace was solid but insufficient to challenge the McLarens. Verstappen now enters Sunday needing a major shift in race dynamics or a moment of opportunity to stay in the title conversation. The sprint was damage limitation but also a reminder of how far the RB21 has fallen in Qatar. The fundamental problem facing every rival in Qatar was the immediate pace separation that Oscar Piastri created from the moment the lights went out. The internal analysis shows that by the time the field reached the end of the second lap, he had already opened a gap that placed him outside the DRS window. This instantly changed the competitive landscape because the chasing cars depended on aerodynamic assistance to remain close. Once Piastri removed that variable, his rivals were forced to rely entirely on raw pace, and the sprint exposed that none of them had a package capable of matching the McL39 in high-speed stability. Another major issue for the competitors was their inability to maintain tire performance under the intense demands of the Lusail circuit. The sprint revealed a clear divide between Piastri, who controlled tire temperatures with precision, and the drivers behind him who suffered from rapid degradation. George Russell lost rear stability when attempting to follow Piastri's pace, while Lando Norris experienced front tire overheating after extended time in Russell's dirty air. Even Max Verstappen reported inconsistent balance due to thermal fluctuations. These tire limitations removed any hope of sustained pressure on Piastri once his early gap was established. Aerodynamic turbulence became the third decisive problem. Qatar punishes any car that follows closely because the long corners require uninterrupted airflow across the front wing and floor. The moment a driver sits behind another car, that airflow collapses. Norris suffered the worst of this effect as he attempted to attack Russell. His front tires lost grip, and the car refused to rotate naturally through the long radiused sections. Verstappen also encountered front-end instability when trying to close on Norris. Meanwhile, Piastri enjoyed the purity of clean air for the entire race, allowing the McL39 to operate at full aerodynamic efficiency. Strategic limitation was another significant problem for the field. The sprint format offers no opportunity for pit stops, tire offsets, or undercuts. Once positions settle within the first 2 laps, the race becomes a pure pace evaluation. That structure heavily favored Piastri because his launch placed him in uncontested air while the others immediately fell into defensive or compromised positions. With no strategic tools available to reset the race dynamic, rivals were locked into a scenario where Piastri's advantage could only grow. The lack of alternative strategies magnified the performance gap and removed any potential tactical threat. A fifth issue stemmed from the contrasting behavior of the cars during corner entry. The leaked report highlights that Piastri maintained consistent rotation in every sector, while Russell fought mid-corner understeer and Verstappen struggled with bouncing under braking. These problems forced the chasing drivers to adjust their driving lines, compromising minimum speed and reducing exit traction. Once the rhythm of a lap breaks down in Qatar, it rarely returns because the tires never fully cool. Piastri's stability amplified his advantage because he was able to drive at a controlled pace without destabilizing tire surface temperatures. Psychological pressure also began to influence the race. When Piastri opened a multi-second lead early on, the drivers behind him shifted mentally into damage limitation rather than pursuit. Russell transitioned into defensive driving to protect second place from Norris. Norris began calculating championship implications instead of pushing aggressively for track position. Verstappen realized that any attempt to force pace would worsen his bouncing problem. This collective shift meant that none of the contenders raced in attack mode, which allowed Piastri to dictate the tempo with absolute freedom. Once that psychological barrier formed, the pack had no route to recovery. The final problem for the field relates to the championship context. With Piastri reducing the gap to Norris to 22 points and Verstappen falling to 25 behind, the sprint redefined priorities heading into Sunday. Norris is now under mounting pressure to defend a narrowing lead while Verstappen must confront the reality that the RB21 cannot match McLaren at this circuit. The sprint demonstrated that Piastri's pace is not a short-term spike but a structural advantage. That puts every rival in a reactive position for the Grand Prix, creating an environment in which mistakes become more likely while Piastri enters the next phase with momentum and confidence. McLaren's engineering group entered the sprint under enormous scrutiny because the team knew the McL39 carried a natural advantage around Lusail, yet they also understood that such an advantage can disappear instantly if the tire preparation or aero balance falls outside the ideal range. The internal report shows their preparation laps were executed with almost surgical precision. Engineers instructed Piastri to build temperature gradually across the front tires while avoiding surface overheating. The strategy worked to perfection and placed the car in its optimal performance window by the time he arrived at turn 1. The second layer of engineering pressure came from the need to stabilize the aerodynamic platform across full lateral load. Qatar's sweeping corners expose every weakness in a car's floor and diffuser behavior. Red Bull and Mercedes suffered instability due to bouncing or drag windows, but the McL39 delivered clean airflow across the entire lap. Engineers confirmed that the car maintained consistent rear downforce even as tire pressures rose. The aerodynamic map remained predictable, which allowed Piastri to drive with minimal corrective input. This level of stability results only from meticulous correlation between wind tunnel, simulation tools, and real circuit data. McLaren also executed a flawless launch control calibration. The analytics highlight that Piastri's clutch bite point and torque delivery were tuned to perfection. Under pressure, engineers made microscopic adjustments after the formation lap to account for track temperature shift, and Piastri produced one of the strongest starts of the entire season. That launch was crucial because it placed him in clean air instantly and removed any chance of Russell interfering with his tire warm-up. The engineering decision to prioritize launch performance shaped the entire sprint outcome. A fourth key engineering success came from the team's approach to managing crosswind sensitivity. Lusail is known for unpredictable gusts that unsettle cars during high-speed corner entries. McLaren adapted its aero balance earlier in the weekend to resist sudden load transfers caused by wind variation. As a result, Piastri's car maintained its intended rotation line even when gusts hit the apex zones. Meanwhile, Russell and Verstappen reported mid-corner unpredictability when wind disturbed their aerodynamic load. This difference in sensitivity allowed the MCL39 to carry higher throttle commitment through the same sections. Thermal management was another area where the engineering team excelled. The power unit must operate below critical temperature thresholds at a circuit that produces sustained high-speed load, yet McLaren kept cooling margins stable for the entire sprint. Engineers continuously monitored thermal deltas and instructed Piastri to push only when temperatures aligned with safe values. The report confirms no derating incidents occurred and that the power unit delivered maximum performance without thermal fade. This careful management prevented any loss of straight-line speed and contributed to the gap Piastri built over Russell. The engineers were also forced to manage the strategic pressure created by the championship context. With the points gap tightening dramatically, McLaren needed Piastri to win efficiently without damaging the tires for Sunday's Grand Prix. Engineering communication focused on steady pace control once the lead exceeded a safe buffer. Piastri responded by holding lap times to within extremely narrow margins. That discipline preserved tire integrity, reduced unnecessary mechanical load, and ensured the car remained within its most efficient aerodynamic state. In a season where tire sensitivity has punished Piastri multiple times, his execution under engineering direction represented a major breakthrough.